through his talk, but if you have any question, please do ask, and if you have no opportunity today to ask question, there will be still a lot of opportunities for you to communicate to him either through me or directly, whatever way you are comfortable with. I'm just simply going to introduce what we are going to do. In a moment or so, we will be singing together one hymn. Feel free to sing loudly as much as you can. So Vaughan will be helping us on organ. We will be singing together, Be Thou My Vision. And then I will invite Peter Brooks to come and to speak to us. And then there will be break for 10-15 minutes for tea and coffee. For you to digest this heavy talk and to prepare and to speak to other friends what questions you are going to ask. We are going to ask him to give him a difficult time. So that's what the plan is. Let us be still for a moment. Look towards God, who is our helper and our guide. Receiving the power of the Spirit for ourselves as ministry area. Lord, be with us, guide us. This evening, Lord, I pray for myself and for all those people who are going to careful listener, and all those people who will be taking ideas from this evening back into their ministries. Especially we pray for Peter. Bless him and guide him as he speaks to us. And we believe you have already spoken with him. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. When we heard the news, we have another archdeacon in the diocese, This evening we have at least two archdeacon, Archdeacon Alan Jevons, who is Archdeacon of Brecon, and Archdeacon Peter Brooks. So it wasn't clear what kind of archdeacon he is going to be. But it is a perfect appointment. It is going to be very helpful for us all across the diocese, because the man who is going to speak to us, I don't want to take a lot of time to introduce him. Many people in St Edmund's Church in this area know him. He has a long-term friendship with St Edmund's Church and other churches in this area. But he is full of creativity, confidence, and compassion for the gospel. Archdeacon Peter Brooks.
Thank you, Rana. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
That's lovely. It was lovely to be back in St Edmund's. I can't remember the last time I was here. The first time I came to St Edmund's, probably I wasn't even ordained. It was when we were bringing up some of our youth group from St John's Birchgrove and Llansamla Parish up here with your Sunday night youth group, and Joe Vickery was your vicar. And from that we were organising the FQ youth camps down to Aberyron, as some of you will remember. And then later when I was ordained, Joe tried to tempt me from Swansea to come up here to be a curate in the parish. But the bishop wasn't having any of that, so he sent me up to Rhayader instead, where I had 10 great years. And I later came back to do an away day with the PCC, I think in Barry's time, for the day. So that was a great time as well. So we got these connections over the years with here. And I always found this to be a great place of spirituality, a great place where people found and answered callings. Of course, Ian Davis, who came out of this church, was one of my colleagues in Swansea up until his retirement recently as well. And other people who you probably remember, people like Jeff Ames and Matthew Sellers, all of whom went on to ordination, are known to you from the work that's been done in this church and the churches in this area. So a great groundswell of Christianity coming out of this place to enable churches elsewhere to thrive and flourish. So first of all, as someone who's had a sort of like a long-standing relationship, about 30 years with this place, thank you for all you have done. My own Christian journey, in a sense, has gone on for some 30 years. 30 years ago, I was only just going back to church with my family for the first time. So it's with a bit of a sense of strangeness that I find myself coming here tonight as an archdeacon for ministry areas, especially when I should have been retiring in June. But then again, when the bishop brings you up and asks you, I knew, as I was saying to Rana, I knew something wasn't quite right, because I was a ministry area leader, and when I said, look, I can't be area dean and ministry area leader. So he said, okay, well, give up the ministry area leader job, concentrate on the area dean. I thought, oh, that was easy. So it went then on to, I knew that in April of this year, or May at the latest, the role of area dean would finish. And I said, do you know what? I think it'd be a good idea now that when area deans finish, I just become, for the next couple of years, a parish priest looking after the 5 churches of Three Cliffs on Gower. He said, yeah, no problem at all. And as I was driving away, I was thinking, well, that was easy as well, because normally bishops will say, oh, do it a bit longer. And then there was this other conversation. For 20-odd years, I've been involved in the healing and deliverance ministry in the diocese, and I was the lead for that and other stuff in the province as well. So at the beginning of last year, I said to the bishop, I've been doing this for 20 years. Do you think it's about time now you found somebody else to do this role? And he said, no problem, we'll find somebody else to do that. And I'm thinking, there's something going on here. I didn't realize what that something was. And then he rang me up last September and said, are you sitting down? And I said, yes, I am. And he said, I'd like to make you an archdeacon. And I'm glad I was sitting down at that moment in time. Very humbling to be asked that, especially in this particular role. I said, well, look, can I go and speak to my wife first? Gentlemen, we all know that if we need to answer a call like that, we first of all need to go and speak to our wives to ensure we're saying the right things. So tottered into the kitchen. Andrea said to me, who was that? I said, it was the bishop. And she's known bishops long enough to ask the next question, what did he want? To which the response was, well, he wants to make me an archdeacon. And she smiled, and she said, well, you may as well do it, because I don't see enough of you now. I thought, well, fair enough, that's, there's a danger, I'll go home tonight, I'll get into bed and she'll scream because she'll say, who are you? And so in November 1st last year, I took up the role of archdeacon with responsibility for ministry areas, which is a bit of a strange thing because actually we've been doing ministry areas in this diocese. As Jeff Davis, where are you, Jeff? Are you hiding behind a pillar somewhere? Yeah, he's there. As Jeff Davis will know, we've been doing this ministry area stuff for quite a few years. But we didn't do it the way we should have done it. I'll explain what I mean by that. For those of us who are on governing body, we remember the Harris Review report coming back to governing body in about 2012. The Harris Review, or as it's now become known as the Church in Wales Review, was a report into the future structures and the organisation of the Church in Wales. There was lots in this report, and if you ever see a copy, you'll see loads of stuff in there of the things that were suggested, but the big change that was promoted at the time and accepted by the governing body was the reorganisation of structures into ministry areas. The coming together of parishes, of benefices, into a greater organisational structure. And that was accepted. In some dioceses, they went for it straight away out of the gate, like St Asaph and Bangor Diocese. And they went for it very early, forming structures, forming legal entities of ministry areas with teams of clergy and laity working in the ministry area with good administrative backup as well. And, like everything else, these things, they falter a bit, they take off, and then, of course, they get bedded in and they become part of the diocesan culture. Llandaff Diocese have followed suit, Monmouth Diocese have followed suit, St David's was one of the earlier ones as well. All of them doing it slightly differently, but all of them making ministry areas properly formed at the heart of the ministry life of the churches. Swansea and Brecon, and I with due respect to to those who have gone before me in this capacity and others, we poked it with a stick. Jeff and myself at Diocesan Conference about 5 years ago were asked to do a presentation of ministry areas, but it turned out to be more like a comic sketch where we had a blank sheet of paper. Because basically what our previous bishop, John Davis, Archbishop of Wales, told us all to do as area deans, as ministry area leaders, here's a blank sheet of paper, go and work it out and see what it will look like in your own area. And some places that worked. We set up a ministry area in Gower quite quickly, and it worked here. St Catwg, Gower and this ministry area were used as the two examples at either end of the diocese where we'd tried to move towards becoming ministry areas very quickly. Very early on, we actually said to the bishop and the registrar of the diocese, make us a single benefice on Gower. Take away the parish boundaries, get us to work together much more quickly, much more closely together. But that idea was rejected at the time by the registrar because it was thought, well, if it don't work, we'll have to undo it. Well, now we've only got the plan A, we haven't got the plan B. And so we became a ministry area, but still retaining all the other structures of parish and deanery as well. With the retirement of our previous Bishop John, as both Bishop of the Diocese and Archbishop as well, we had to elect a new bishop. As those of you maybe on the Electoral College know, at the first round it did not work and it fell to the bench of bishops. And so nominated and chosen was our current Bishop John Lomas, who'd been an archdeacon in the Diocese of St Asaph and had been very much responsible for the implementation and of the bringing together of ministry areas there. So John has come to the diocese with a vision for the diocese, not just for this year, but for the years to come. And it starts off on quite a serious premise, the premise that apart from certain places, we are a church in decline. We are a church that, for whatever reason, and it's not a blame game, whatever reason, through perhaps COVID is a good factor, the age of congregations perhaps is another, or just generally the way the church has grown over the years and developed, we are now seeing a decline in our worshipping numbers. Not everywhere, not everywhere. There are places where the trend is being bucked. Thank God for that. But we do need to have a plan in place for the future of our church. Likewise, we are also currently operating with the lowest number of stipendiary clergy we've ever had. Now, on the one hand, that makes us, in one sense, more leaner. It makes us work much more closely with laity. And I think a good ministry area, a good parish even, a good church, is a balance of ordained and lay working together, using the gifts that God has given them, using the gifts of the Spirit to work in their communities. But we've probably now reached the point where we can't have any less clergy. We can't go any lower than that. So we have to find a way of deploying those clergy sensibly and well for the good of God's kingdom. We also have to find a way of recruiting more clergy too. And the bishop has already promised, through money that's available via the representative body, that we will have at least 4 more stipendiary clergy in the diocese. And currently in the system, either between trying to discern a calling or looking to go into full-time training and in full-time training, we do have about 19 people who are expressing an interest in the ordained ministry. So it's not a bleak picture by any means. Yes, there is on the one hand a sense that we are a church that needs to look to its future. We are a church that certainly needs to rediscover what it's about in many places. We are a church that needs to grow its clergy, but also on the other hand needs to grow the gifts of our laity. And you've got a good history and track record of this here. But we're also a church that needs to think, how best can we be shaped for future mission and ministry in this diocese? My own ministry in this church, I went to St Michael's College for 2 years, 97 to 99. I was ordained in 99. I did a curacy for 2 years in Morriston, a different side of Swansea to where I was born and brought up, but I knew the area. And then I'd always had a hankering for rural ministry. So I did 10 years up in Rhayader, around the Ellen Valley. When I first went there, we had 5 separate parishes, 8 churches in 5 separate parishes, and I was the only ordained cleric. I was told I had a lay reader, but I quickly found out that he was 95 years old. Brilliant man, but at 95 I couldn't really be expecting him to be doing too much Sunday by Sunday. So 8 churches, 5 PCCs, and an expectation of a full service pattern as well. So we had to do a number of things. We had to look at the structure of it. Very quickly, we brought the 5 churches together as a single benefice, the benefice of what is now called Gwastedyn, so that there would be a benefice structure overarching and looking after the 8 churches. We developed a team of lay worship leaders and lay pastoral visitors to assist. And the other thing we also did as well was we took on a part-time administrator. But she was so good, she got ordained. But that role has continued with another administrator, but that administrator now serves a wider area. So we've put into place the fact that we couldn't function with too many committees, too many structures. We needed to do something about it. We needed to thin that down. We put into place a system whereby it became a partnership between ordained and lay, and we put into place a system whereby I was backed up by good administration to enable me to do the things that I as a vicar needed to do, not stuck behind a screen working on rotas and faculties and all the other things, which we do get bogged down on. So those we sort of decided were the basis. And also, we looked at the pattern of worship, the pattern of services across this benefice to see what was working, what was doable Sunday by Sunday by Sunday. 12 years ago, the bishop asked me to go and take on the parish of Three Cliffs in Gower, which at that time was 2 churches becoming 4 churches, and eventually another church to make 5 churches coming in as well. And again, we did the same thing. We had some eventually some non-stipendiary curates, which were homegrown out of the parish, lay reader, as well as lay worship leaders. We haven't got an administrator at this present time, and the difference is noticeable. But also, a manageable pattern of worship that gives a variety of lay-led and ordained-led services across the ministry area, across the Gower, which helps us to manage, in a way, our time and effectively minister to people across the peninsula. So the Gower ministry area, as it did stand, was the first and only commissioned ministry area in the diocese. It's changed a bit. We've taken in part of suburban Swansea by bringing the old parishes of Catwg and Calais into it. And that has sort of made it slightly different in flavour. And we're currently running it with, it should be 4 stipendiary clergy, but we have 2 vacancies, one in Southwest Gower and one in Calais and Catwg, which we're covering as a clergy team at the moment. Because even though I'm archdeacon for ministry areas, I am also still part of the time incumbent of my own parish of Three Cliffs. So I have to wear different hats depending on what day of the week it is, I think. So how does that affect us going forward? Well, John Lomas outlined in his roadshows a way that he felt the diocese could move forward effectively from where we are, which in some cases are benefices which have been drawn together from groups of churches, single church parishes, and with a bit of adjusting of the boundaries, because we had far too many ministry areas before, with some adjusting of boundaries, bringing together some of the old ministry areas into new ministry areas. The one thing he observed virtually straight away is that we had too many levels of bureaucracy or meetings in our churches. So, for example, in a multi-church benefice, you'd have your church council, which was the sort of unofficial, unelected body that would just get on day by day with the local stuff. Then you'd have what might be called a benefice PCC, which was the legal body of the church dealing with all the bits and pieces of the church and the area, the benefice it served. And then perhaps over that you'd have a ministry area council. And then, of course, on top of that, the other layer would be the deanery conference. And we all know the definition of a deanery conference is people who didn't attend the meeting where they were elected and are sitting there waiting to go home. A deanery conference can be very effective in getting churches from a wide area together. But it was decided very early on, as the bishop and the senior staff, or the bishop staff were looking at this, that we would take away the deanery level and we would take away the PCC level, and that we would just have 2 structures in place, the ministry area council and the local church council as well. And of course, on top of that, you'd have the usual body of standing committee and diocesan conference as well to look at the governance overall of the churches. So the bishop originally said that we would be moving from point A to point B very quickly, and that we would get it done by spring was the initial date that he looked at. Well, we were away as a senior staff, or bishop staff rather, before Christmas. We tried to narrow down that date, and we have said that we are hoping that all the ministry areas that have been proposed and accepted by standing committee will become these legal structures by sometime Pentecost to Trinity Sunday onwards into early June. So all these ministry areas which are now being talked about will actually become formal ministry areas with a ministry team licensed to them, a ministry area leader as well. So that will take care of the sort of legal bits, the formal bits. We're also currently about to interview for the administration teams. The diocese will be employing the administrators directly, and those administrators will be part of the organisation of Brecon, but also working then and situated within the ministry areas. There will be a supervisory administrator who will be able to train and keep an eye and make sure all the systems that are needed to keep the ministry areas going are in place. But our part-time ministry areas will be employed, ministry area administrators will be employed for the first 5 years directly by the diocese with no costs to the ministry areas, and they will work 21 hours a week, and they will be part of the diocesan structure as well as the ministry area structure. So that will actually give, hopefully, as I was speaking to the 2 benefices over in Trachlong near Brecon last night, that will free up the clergy to be clergy. Because one of the questions that I was asked last night is, when will we see the vicar visiting? It's a very pointed question, especially when the vicar's sitting next to you. So you don't know really how to answer that. And I say, look, I know myself that over the years, clergy visiting has by and large become more reactive than proactive. But that's because, for whatever reason, we suddenly find ourselves almost managing parishes now, in conjunction, of course, with lay teams. And here has always had a good lay setup, but not everywhere is as fortunate as here. In some places, they haven't got the skills, the resources to do it by themselves. So by coming into a wider ministry area, then there is a sharing of resources, a sharing of skills and gifts. So again, a very good reason, I think, for coming into ministry areas with a ministry team and an administrator and the gifts of the laity around us, to enable us, people like myself still, because I'm an incumbent of a parish, to be able to minister in a way that I felt originally called to do. So there is a roadmap, and also there's this. Now, if you're a church officer, if you're a treasurer or a secretary, and you'll also find this on the website, there's a booklet currently on there, and also will be sent out in this week's bulletin to you, called Ministry Areas, Your Questions Answered. And we're hoping to try and make this as widely seen by as many people as possible. And the reason for that is this is a digest, or a compendium, I should say, of all the questions I've been asked since going out on the road on nights like this and afternoons since the 1st of November, speaking to churches, speaking to clergy. And it won't surprise you to hear that perhaps the majority of questions are about, guess what? Money, yes, I'm a gold star. Money. The next one is buildings. Then it's money again. And the other one, the most critical one, I think, which a lot of people ask is, who will be my vicar? Who will marry me? Who will christen me? Who will bury me? Who will come and visit me? Who will I see Sunday by Sunday, God willing, in my church under the pattern of worship? It's proposed to license the clergy to the ministry area as a team. But it's also proposed that we allocate to the churches in the clusters that they're in, a name in the place. Like, for example, here is Rana. Well, after the ministry area gets bedded in, it'll still be Rana. And you may occasionally see other members from the team. But there will always be a point of contact. There will always be a go-to person. There will always be a name over the door that people know where to go to for the christenings, the weddings, the funerals, the hospital visits, the pastoral care, the things that need to be done, that we should be doing as God's church. And so we've got a time whereby we are hoping to get the mechanics of it done, of getting the ministry area into place, of electing a ministry area council, of getting the team of clergy licensed. And you could then say, well, that's job done. But it's not. Because then we have to look at how we do this. And one of the things that we will then have to do with the ministry team and the ministry area council is to look at what I call the working agreement. How will the churches relate to one another? How will they work together? How will they share resources? How will they undertake their local mission? How will they undertake the general mission of God's church within that ministry area? What can they do best together? What do they do best by themselves? What is local? What is much more wider? Not every church can do everything. And I think we recognize the fact that in lots of places, it's not about what one church can do by itself. It's about how churches work together in proclaiming God's kingdom. But that's not ignoring the fact that all churches are different. If I look at the 5 churches I've got under my care on Gower, they're all different in their own way. The people are different. The villages that they serve are different. The suburbs that they serve are different. They have a different flavor traditionally of spirituality in some of them and the way church is expressed. Some are formal, some are less formal. It depends on their experience of church over the years. So it's recognizing that as well. When I worked for Tesco's, we used to call it the USP, the unique selling point. It's about knowing what each church has that's unique to them, that draws people to that church. Why do people come here? Or why do people go to Chitawa? Why do people go over the river to Catwg? What is the difference that draws them to these places, apart perhaps from family connections, the tradition, that's the place I've always go to? Why do I call that place, that church, my spiritual home? The place where I am fed and nurtured in my faith. So it's identifying that and also celebrating that and ensuring that that stays as part of the flavor and the makeup of the ministry area as well. And once you got all that in place, and I'm an optimist, I've always been an optimist, but I'm also a realist. And I realize it's like driving down a road filled with speed bumps. We can't go too fast because we'll bump all over the place. But there are some things we need to do quite quickly. And we will hopefully, over the next week or so, or in the next month, be publishing a timeline of how we move forward. But in all the smoothness of the road we go down, when we encounter these bumps, these are things that we have to overcome. And I'm not saying I've got every answer to your questions. But what I am saying is that certainly as a team, our bishop staff, we are exploring a lot of the current challenges that are being raised, a lot of the current questions that are being raised regarding our ministry areas and how we move into them. And then there comes what I call the good stuff. Because if this was just a rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic situation, I wouldn't be doing this job. Because to me it would just be about administration. It would just be about saying, okay, well, we'll move that to there, and that will look good for the time being until it doesn't work. Everything we do, every change we make, has to be underpinned with prayer. Prayer must lie at the heart of all these changes as we take them forward. And it's got to be about the kingdom of God. How do we, as God's people here in 2023 in Crickhowell and all the churches in this area, proclaim God's kingdom to the people in our communities and to the people who come through that door? What is our mission to the community that we serve, and how are we best equipped to do that? What can we do individually? What do we do well together? What can we do in partnership with others? And this is something we will be gradually exploring over the next 12 months and beyond. My role as archdeacon will not end once the bishop has the inauguration service and hands out the title deed for the ministry area and licenses the clergy. To a certain extent, that's when my job starts. It's about coming back and working with church councils and ministry area councils. It's about working with clergy teams. It's about working with your leadership team in your ministry area. We've got a number of away days lined up where we'll be going off to Llangasti with each of the ministry area teams and saying, okay, let's dream. Let's look at the future. Let's say, where do we want to be? Where would we like to see our church? What would we like to do? And I think sometimes, we can actually get so bogged down in the details of what we're doing, what we're about. And there's always a lot of detail. Vaughan was talking just now about auditing the annual accounts. This is the time of year when we are doing that sort of thing. We have to do that through the Constitution, obviously. But is that what we're about? We've got to do it. But to me, the church is bigger than that. I didn't get ordained to be doing that sort of thing. I know I've got to do that sort of thing. But to me, it's about the ways of discovering, the way we take what God has given us. And God has given us so much. These buildings are a gift. Your skills are a gift. What we've been given is a gift. And how do we show the best of that to our world? Now, I'm friends with Rana on Facebook, so I see all the stuff that goes on here. I see the things you do out in the streets. I see the food and all that you do, and the organization and all the bits and pieces that this church has always done. And that fills me with great confidence for the future for here and around this area. But I also show those things to colleagues of mine elsewhere and say, look what they're doing there. Look at that. Is that something you don't want to try? Because I think all too often in the past, I don't know whether it's the culture of church or what, we've actually just put up barriers and said, well, we're doing this over here because this is our church and we want to do our thing. Well, the reality is, as God's family, we should be saying, this is what we're doing over here. Do you want to do it with us? Or do you want us to come to you and show you what we're doing? And I think that's part of the mindset moving forward, of having faith that what we're doing is the right thing, learning to develop trust in one another, that we're all working for the same goal, and helping to establish in our churches what it is about our churches that would make someone walk through that door and stay. Because when I went back to church in St John's, Birch Grove, 30 years ago, there was something about the welcome, something about the environment, something about the people that persuaded my wife and myself, with children from the age of, well, right down to, and some of you remember, my little one, he's now 30-odd years old. But he used to, we used to come up here, he used to play a lovely game. He used to run around, boom, 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 boom. You could hear him, boom, 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 running around here. He's grown up, he's married, he's got a child of his own. But there's something that made us stay in that church. It made it easier, acceptable for us as a family who had very little idea of what the Christian faith was about, and bringing children to church for the first time. That made us want to stay, become part of that family, and grow into that family. Ordination certainly wasn't on the cards at that time. That was a surprise to me. So perhaps ministry areas, for all every organizational structures and the way we are as a church and the way we present ourselves, is perhaps a catalyst for looking at so much else beside as well in the wider area of where our churches are sat. At this stage, I'm going to shut up. I've talked enough. What I would like to do, perhaps, Ron, is ask if there are any questions now. And if you want to, then we can stop, have that cup of coffee, and come back for some more questions. Are there any immediate questions? And there's two things. I forgot to bring my elephant with me tonight. Normally, I've got a little pink elephant, right? It was given to me by my granddaughter. It's a character from Haven Holidays called Anxious the Elephant. Now, she's 12 years old, my granddaughter, but she's very sharp, because she said, this elephant, she said, is a bit like people and change. It's anxious, we're all a bit anxious, and it's the elephant in the room. And there's always the question of the elephant in the room. And so before you go home tonight, please ask the elephant in the room question. Don't do what I used to do as a member of the PCC in Llansamla Church, have a meeting in the car park afterwards. To try and second guess. You see, you've done it, you know, don't you? You know straight away. To try and second guess what the vicar had said. Okay? There's no question that mustn't be asked. There's no subject that's off limits. And there's nothing which I think is a daft question. There's no such thing as a daft question. It is about getting the right answer. There are a lot of the answers already in this booklet, but I'm more than happy to take questions and answers here tonight, because that's my job. And if I haven't got the answer, I will find the answer for you. So fire away. Not literally, but fire away. You're very quiet, Jeff.
Oh, Peter.
Yeah, Jeff Davis knows it all as well, so just ask him. Any burning question, or do you want to stop and have a cup of coffee, have a natter amongst yourselves and come back?
Have a cup of coffee. Peter, can I just ask, Bulk Church is becoming, as I understand it, part of this movement?
Yes.
Can you explain what the process is of them embracing us and us embracing them?
Yeah, they will actually just become legally part of the ministry area, and they will fit into the structure of the ministry area council. But then we'll have to figure on the way the actual, pattern is managed.
Are they represented in this meeting, can I ask?
Yeah.
Bulk grew out as a mission church from the parish of Catwg decades ago.
Oh, that's right, of course, yes.
Some while ago, Catwg closed.
Yeah.
It was left Bulch. When I came as Vicar of St Edmund, Bulch was really on its beam's end. I thought it was going to be the first church that would close in that group. In fact, they had a revival. And the revival was caused by work needed doing to the building, and they got an impetus behind them to do quite a lot of substantial rebuilding work and to make the building useful for worship, make it warm, comfortable, welcoming. And that breathed new life into it. It has to be said, however, that there have been some key individuals from that church that have disappeared off the scene. They've moved, they've gone for various reasons. And it now is in really quite a very sad state indeed. And I think its future is very uncertain. Congregation is very small. I mean, when we go and, I mean, a lot of my time is not spent in St Edmund now, as you know, it's all over the place. But I'm still living there and still the assistant curate of that benefice. I should be the assistant curate in the new
you shouldn't you? Yes.
when it comes into being. So I still take services there. When I have to go and take a service, I have to go down to Catwg, the vicar, and get the key off him down the town hall, go up to Bulch, open it all up, turn the lights on, electricity, make sure it's all there, get the water out. Sometimes I have to take all my own communion stuff because, in fact, the wafers have gone mouldy. And I mean, it's like that. And afterwards, the congregation that's there sort of says, I stay as vicar, and off they go. And then I have to lock it all up, turn the lights off, make sure, I mean, then return the key to Catwg. It's a matter of enterprise.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not going to happen here. I just don't believe that Rana or Jeremy or whoever goes up there, or any of you go up there, and they're going to be doing that. And I think there are big questions as to what its future actually is. And my gut feeling is that we have to probably take the walls now and go for closure on that building. There are a few people up there, but as I say, they are. It is a very sad, sorry little state. But they won't be here. I don't think
no, the two people from Bulch were at the meeting at St Edmund.
Right, okay.
And they were asking questions about coming over to you. And I said, well, you haven't got two heads. You worship the same thing. But I think they felt quite vulnerable at that stage about coming across that. But I think it's because of the things that Alan's just mentioned. But we'll have to wait and see.
Historically, Bulch has had a link, I think, with Canada in terms of personality for people. And my feeling is probably the building will go, and the people that are there might well come in as people to your congregations.
So,
May I just ask, you said, I think we will have to take the bull by the horns. The we in question will be what? Ministry?
No, I think that's what I mean us, the bishop's staff.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to, have to have a serious conversation with the people there as to how they see their future and their mission developing, if they do. And then
how will you do that? Simply by saying, I'm sorry, you're not going to have anybody visiting as a salaried full minister, or will you say, will you agree to close it, or will you say you're being closed? I mean, what's the process?
Oh, sorry, thank you. Yes, I mean, legally, I think that the closure can be initiated by the bishop, who can simply declare that actually next week we're closing this church. I mean, they won't do that because there'll be a revolution on their hands. So, on the whole, it has to bubble up from below. But I think it means having a conversation with the few people up there and saying, look, it's now become unsustainable, has it not? And you can't maintain the building properly. The finances don't exist now. It's time that it was closed, and then there would have to be some resolution for redundancy, and then the process would kick into action.
I think the one thing to take on, as Alan did say, that there is a consultation process.
But if the church community does become part of this ministry area, in a sense it's not a big change really, because they would elect, presumably, if they can, they would elect one person that would sit on the ministry area council. They would be their own church committee, which they already are because they're already part of the parish of Flint St Adam, so they already have a church committee in theory. Well, they don't, but they should have, that already functions. So it would be no great change, really. It would just mean that the ministry provision would be going from here to there, rather than from, well, where I live, or where Calvin lives, from Flint St Adam to there. Yeah. So
one thing we found very helpful in the Gower ministry area was the set of a Buildings and Grants Committee. And the Buildings and Grants Committee were taken from one or two of the clergy and also some of the laity who had a particular interest in buildings. And that Buildings and Grants Committee had access to all the sort of quinquennial inspections of all the churches and looked at them and reviewed them from time to time, as well as the ability, what work needs doing critically, what work needs doing, over the next couple of years. And we sort of tried to schedule that in, working with the churches, looking at what funds they've got, what grants they may have to apply for. At the last count, when I say it, it's a bit frightening. For the 17 churches that were in the Gower ministry area, we had something like £1 million worth of work that we had to try and get done in the next 5 years. Now, some of that is cosmetic, some of that will be critical. But to help us with that, up until now, I don't know if the process of quinquennial inspections has always been done by the diocese appointing external surveyors to come in and survey the churches. And this has led in some cases to, shall we say, an inequality of reporting. So in one 5 year, you might get surveyor A actually saying, this needs doing, that needs doing, there's the bill. And 5 years later, another surveyor comes along and says, this needs doing, that needs doing, and it may not bear any resemblance to what has been said previously. So we're going to do away with that system. We're actually appointing, I think it's from April, isn't it, a diocesan buildings inspector to do all that person will be employed out of the money we'll save from farming out the quinquennial inspections. So it's not on your share, so don't worry about that. But that person will then be able to give us a consistency of building reports over the period of time, but also will be available to the churches to consult on the building work that is recommended and anything structurally that needs doing. So by doing this, as they have done in other dioceses, they've been able to regularise the inspections, but also find out a lot about, by the consistency of these reports and working with the church councils in the wider area to get a planned maintenance programme for the churches into place that is both affordable and is realistic. So that we're looking forward to that in April when this new gentleman comes on board. And I think that will certainly see a bit of a difference in how some of these problems that are with our churches are identified. Is that time out? Do you want a cup of coffee, do you? I'm so glad to hear that. But before, he's going time out. Does anybody else have a burning question before we have coffee? Well, let's have a burning cup of coffee, then come back for the questions. Thank you for that.
But they are Yeah. It's shut over the winter. Hasn't it? quick would they come round then? I mean, how quick are they to work?
Well, the surveyor wouldn't be involved unless it's a massive job. It would be the PCC would just say, right, you need to get somebody up there to do a repair job, and whatever that costs, they have to pay it. The surveyors only get involved in something pretty serious.
The surveyor comes round every 3 years. 5 years. And it's a bit like an MOT. It says what it needs to be, and then it's up to us to do it right.
And then 5 years later, it's the same stuff. Because it hasn't been done.
If you get a different surveyor coming round, he won't see the thing first one saw, but he'll see different things. So at least when it's employed by the bishop, then he will see, he will be contributing and to it. Yeah, but it's only a 5 years. Would you like to give it's easy to show.
How was Seth doing? I saw you the other day, he's got a stick.
It's more for balance. I was using it. Well, we went up to West Wales a couple of years before that. Had a couple of injections under anaesthetic in his life. I have them as well. But it's really a weakness of his. And it stops him doing a great deal of the ladder, So it looks as if it's blood, but in actual fact, having this long stick.
It's a comfort.
Well, no, because you couldn't manage with a walking stick because you were putting weight on it and it wasn't right.
Well, I was using one of these walking sticks, walkers, and they were really useful.
Yeah, that was amazing. I keep saying that, you should birthday next week. And not this week.
Hey, what?
Yeah. You should do a proud But he does like this stuff. As you see, he's sort of in his mind, like he's
Confidence thing.
It's all right, it's just the well, I mean, his music was quiet tonight. He was
Oh, is he? He's a singer, is he?
could never sing a song. And we did enjoy his audition. But I like singing Welsh. So I target secretary.
Oh, he did.
Yeah, I
He's
was
moved
going to
there.
say it's not going to be. Yes, I think he is still. Yes, because I think is he church warden or I mean chaplain? Anyway, yes. This is the chapel. I know we went to a Gamamba there, but yes, anyway, I mean this like part. He's there from there, and you just don't know what's going to come out of it. Some of the jokes are that's evil, but it's a bit
I can see him now when I used to have my office in Crigoli. He was with the Leicester Building Society.
right.
I can see him coming through the door now. He would always be shooting.
Yeah. Oh yes.
Lamps in this well.
Yeah,
I don't know what the hell he was saying.
no,
applied to the Disability Society for a job. I went up to the offered me a job, and they said, I'd ask you to go to Swansea. They attached to Swansea to trade in, could be down there a couple of years. We lived in Gilman then. I was already working for a company in Cardiff, back to the idea was that ultimately you would get a job in Brexit. And lo and behold, it was Viv that ended up coming to Brexit. He was that job. Quite funny, really. I didn't know him beforehand.
No. I'll mention it to him next time I talk to him, because I mean, because it says the only one really that comes from Gilbert.
Yeah, it was a bit
It is. And if ever there's anything like it's either that way or that way, I've learned more about the little villages actually around here in the last 3 years that I've actually existed. But, anyway,
That's the other way, yeah.
that's my But it's, I go because he doesn't like to come home by himself. He just thinks, well, I'm going to be somebody else in the car. I just go. So, I know all of that.
Because what you do is the formatting limit is
Well, I would if he was with you, you know.
Attention please, ladies and gentlemen, would you please come back? We are going to start. Start soon. Yeah. After having a cup of tea or coffee and this wonderful, joyful, warm conversation, I guess a few more questions have popped up in your mind. Phil is ready with his revolving microphone. He can come to you to project your voice. I have a special announcement for a very special person. I won't start until you are settled properly in your seats. Sorry? If you have any question to ask, please get yourself ready. But before I invite our Ministerial Council Chair, John Coupland, who will further take this conversation on, I just want to give big thanks to God for various things that happen in our ministry area. Last week I heard Jeffrey Davis and his services in the wider church has been significantly acknowledged, and he has been acknowledged to be the recipient of Monday Award, which is in recognition of his services to the church. You may clap. So if you won't see him around at the climax of the Holy Week, which means on Monday, Thursday, you will find him at the York Minster receiving his award.
Rather, could I say, I'm not the first in recent years to receive this award.
Either Mrs. Brock is.
Janice received it 2-3 years ago, but because of the pandemic, was unable to go to the ceremony. So we have 2 Maundy Thursday awards.
So Janice Block was awarded 2 years ago, which is good. Yeah, I think that's the reason, Peter. All great things happen in this ministry area.
Including Jeffrey Davis.
Including Jeffrey Davis. John.
Okay, thank you. Just in case you didn't hear clearly what Rana said, just introduce myself to those who don't know me. I'm John Coupland. It's been my great privilege to be the chairman of the Ministry Area Council for the last 3 years. And I'm just going to stand in now to direct any of your questions for our speaker tonight. So, I've got a couple to kick us off, if we would like, Peter. This is a bit of an esoteric one about the reorganisation, but when the legal framework of the ministry area is formed, does that mean existing benefices will be legally dissolved?
I think the best way to answer that is to look at the timeline that we know so far. This year, like all the other years that we've done it, our benefices, parishes, will have their annual vestry meetings. And of course, at that meeting, you will produce, as you always have done, your annual report. And to a certain extent, that will draw a line into the business of our churches as they currently stand. It'll be the last annual vestry meeting, the last annual report for the benefices and parishes as we know them. In 2024, it'll be a single annual vestry meeting for the ministry area and a single report for the ministry area. So the current legal PCCs will be dissolved, and at each of the vestry meetings, at the vestry meetings that you will hold in your own areas, each of the churches will elect a representative to sit on the ministry area council, which will be the legal PCC, for want of a better word, of the new ministry area. Of course, the individual churches will still have their own informal church councils, church gatherings with their own treasurer and their sub-wardens as well. So you will have the last of your benefice parish PCCs, and at some stage soon we're hoping that the clergy and your ministry team can actually get together and work out and request a date from the bishop for the inauguration service at a location for your ministry area. The Bishop's Secretary will then give a date and you will work towards that particular afternoon, morning or evening service, depends when it is, of coming together as that ministry area. The ministry area license, the document, the legal document will be the same for all the ministry areas, as will the licensing, the relicensing of the clergy to the ministry areas. That will be the same document as well. What you will then work on later, of course, as I said, is the working agreement within your ministry area. We've still got to find, hang on, I've just finished what I was going to say, right? We're still working on bits of that timeline with regards to the elections, because we have to do it within the constitution of the Church in Wales, but we realise that some of the technicalities of doing it and some of the logistics of doing it, we may have to think through. Normally, after you've had an annual vestry meeting, within a fortnight, you have to have the first of your PCCs, don't you? The one thing I've suggested that possibly that within the fortnight of the inauguration service of your ministry area, you will have the first of your ministry area council meetings, the legal ministry area council. But there will need also to be a time where the benefices and parish PCCs just wind up their business and draw a line under that. It's not, however, there are some things, I'll be honest with you, there are some things, it won't happen overnight in a way, because, of course, there will be things in each of the churches and each of the benefices that will need to be unpicked as well and put into the ministry area. And the diocesan office will be able to help with that as we're moving forward. The book that you've got now, or will have, the questions and answers, relates mostly to structure. There are some financial questions in there, but it relates mostly to structure. There's another volume coming out that relates to finance and charity and things like that. So bear with us, okay? We're not making it up as we're going along. What we're doing is actually coming together as a bishop staff with the questions that we're having from the meetings to try and work out how best we can make this process, I wouldn't say as painless as possible, but as efficient as possible, so it works well for everybody across the diocese. You had your hand up. Sorry about that.
It follows on from what John asked, in a way, and what you have just answered, in as much as presumably each church will have to contribute something to the annual report of
yes.
I'm getting mixed up with all the terminology.
I know. Call it the Ministry Area Council.
Thank you.
Yeah, the ministry. So yeah, the annual report for the ministry area will be. They will need. It'd be good to have a contribution from each of those churches next year, because it's not just about one church. That's why you have equal representation from the churches across the ministry area. All the churches, regardless of whether they're here in the middle of Crickhowell, over the river in Llangatog, or up in the hills, are an equally valid part of the ministry area. So if they have that equally valid bit, as well as being on the representation, actually needs to be in the reporting. So when you get that document in 2024, however it comes to you, whether it's a physical document or an online document, actually says, look, these are the churches in this ministry area, and this is what they're doing.
Including a statement of our own finances.
Finances, right. I am not the archdeacon for finances, but thank God. We do need an archdeacon. I think we need an archdeacon for finances. I don't know if the bishop will agree with that. With the reorganisation of the ministry area from parishes and benefices into a single legal structure, you will need to have a ministry area account, which will be managed by a ministry area treasurer who you will appoint yourselves. That ministry area account initially will manage the share, the ministry area share, and also the clerical expenses and any other small expenses that might be accrued by the whole of the ministry area.
That happens already, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does here, but not everywhere.
Oh.
Okay, you're ahead of the game here. So in a way, it's the terrible expression we got in Swansea, which you might know, I'm teaching my granny to suck eggs. You know what I mean? It's like you're telling somebody who's already doing something what they should be doing. But that's not the same everywhere across the diocese. We're having to start in some places at point A. In some places, you're already down the road on this. That still means that the individual churches, for the time being, have to look after their own money, their own allocated funds, because, of course, in many places, people have willed and gifted and endowed money to individual churches, and they stay with those churches and are managed locally. Okay? The call initially on the ministry area account is for the payment of the ministry share and the expenses of ministry as well. Now, you will be allocated a figure, or have already been allocated a figure. What we are suggesting is that your treasurers, you lock them in a room and they don't come out until they've worked out how to fairly allocate that share across the ministry area. Okay? Might need a bit of a... might need a bit. Well, that is done in conjunction with the ministry area council as well. But it might need a bit of fine tuning. Now, obviously, costs have risen. So, depending on your ministry area, depending on the staffing costs of your ministry area, there will be some fluctuation in that. But that's something which needs to be determined by the treasurers. What Brecon are also doing is inviting the treasurers from the ministry areas, as they come into being, to have a conversation with them as well, either online or on the phone, to discuss the individual situations in the churches and how that payment of that share can be achieved.
Okay. That actually, you've answered a question I was going to ask as well, because I know it's been asked by many people. And when I think it was actually Jeremy came to the MA Council and started explaining all this to the council, one of the first questions is, what happens to our individual funds? I think most churches have got a building fund or a churchyard fund or whatever, and money that, as you say, has been gifted to the church. And as things stand, just to reiterate what you said, that stays with us, with the individual church.
You will, in some places, and they've found this with experience, perhaps in St Asaph Diocese, some ministry areas have actually lumped all their funds together in a single account, but it's still managed that amount of money belongs to that church, that amount of money belongs to that church, that amount of money belongs to that church. And they've done that probably because at some stage, they haven't been able to find the treasurers in the individual churches to manage the individual accounts. We have got a couple of churches on Gower that share a treasurer for that very reason, because they haven't been able to find a treasurer to manage their accounts. But that comes with time and trust and experience. But we're trying to keep it simple to start with in that area. Because I know finances, you see, it's always one of the biggest hurdles in the ministry area, is if we get bogged down on the finances, we move on to the kingdom stuff.
Yeah. Are there any other questions? Any other questions for Peter? Yes, can you wait for the microphone? Thank you.
Peter, we at St Edmunds have just embarked on some major structural work to our west retaining wall. Who in future will be making the faculty applications and maybe grant applications?
Depends how you work it in your own ministry area. In some places, it might be left to the individual church, it might be left to a buildings and grants committee, or it may be down to working with the administrator to do that. Or if you find, like we found in one or two of the places I've been, somebody who really likes completing faculty forms. I kid you not. I have found two people who love doing faculties because it's the way they think, the way they work. They love ticking the boxes and they love preparing getting the plans and the drawings together. So they are out there. Don't laugh. It's true. I'm a vicar. I wouldn't lie to you, honest. But it's like some people like hands up if you like looking at spreadsheets. There we are. See, some people love spreadsheets. Well, it's no stretch of the imagination to find somebody who would love to do a faculty form. So you determine that amongst yourselves. That's part of the work of the Ministerial Council. Is there somebody who is gifted and skilled in doing that? Or is it a skill that we could share across the ministry area? If you've already embarked on that process, okay, obviously you've come to the PCC or the Ministerial Council, said, this is the process we're embarking on, this is the finance we need, this is the finance we got, we cannot start this until we get all the finance in place. And you go back to the Ministerial Council and say, here's all the evidence, right, sign the contract, get the job done. And that would be the same with the Ministerial Council when it's up and running legally. You would take all the evidence to them and say, we've got all the funds to do this, or we've got the grants in place, we've got the quotes, we've got wriggle room as well, you know, in case it costs more, and then you start the work. That will save us the embarrassment on 2 occasions recently where churches have had to go to the diocese and the RB because they've embarked on projects that haven't been fully costed. Okay. So you've got the right way of doing it here. All you need now is to find somebody who'll do the faculty forms you.
Any more questions? Yeah.
I'm interested to know that there will be more clergy, but I'd like to know what the principles are for the deployment of those clergy and how they will be spread in the different churches and how that fits with maintaining a sense of congregational identity.
Currently, clergy are allocated, obviously, to parishes, to benefices, or groups of churches. In the future, we hope what the plan will be, the clergy will be recruited for the ministry area and licensed in the ministry area, but deployed to churches in that ministry area. They won't be solely the incumbent of those churches, but they will be the person who will have pastoral responsibility and have first point of contact for those churches. So, for example, when Gower becomes, under the new system, a legal ministry area, I will lose my license as incumbent, which really means nothing these days because we're all priest in charge in the Church in Wales technically because of common tenure. And I will just become a vicar in the ministry area with pastoral responsibility for the 5 churches I currently have, as well as being archdeacon. So we will look to allocate to a team member coming in specific churches. And of course, currently, as you have at the moment, where you have a vacancy, of course, the responsibility is spread across the existing clergy. And in a way, in future, ministry areas will not have vacancies as such. You'll just have additional clergy when they are taken on, either through retirement or people leaving, to be deployed across the ministry area. And of course, we may be looking at the skill set, the gifts that those persons have, as we bring them into the ministry area as well. Thank you.
Can you just pass the microphone behind you?
Thanks very much. Julian Stedman again. I'm interested in lay ministry. We've developed, I think, a very strong lay ministry culture in these churches. I'm one of them. And we've very much taken on board the challenges of young people, of Open the Book, Messy Church, all the things that lay ministers can do, evangelism, which I'm involved in, and older people's ministry, and I'm sure I've left things out that I should have mentioned. Strikes me that is a very important sort of powerhouse for church development and for the core of the group growing in spirituality. And we've seen that happening across churches as well, not just within one church. I think that's great. So my question is, having seen that work so well in a setting like this, and having heard that actually some churches are struggling with that, how do you see that being, not just for us really, but for elsewhere? How do you see that developing? I actually asked the bishop, who could I twin with as an evangelist in this ministry area? And I was told, well, actually, there isn't anybody else in the diocese.
Julian,
I am unique.
Yeah.
And that is really worrying, isn't it? One evangelist for the whole diocese, and I'm not particularly strong evangelist, and I'm going to be retiring soon. So, you know, what are we doing about recruiting people like me into the ministry? How are we developing those skills and encouraging people to participate?
You need to have a conversation with Anthony Porter, who's the Bishop's Officer for Lay Ministry. I can only speak of our own experience in Gower. We've developed across Gower quite a strong team of lay worship leaders. We haven't got an evangelist yet, but they are all evangelists in their own way, the way they go about their ministry. And we've got lay pastoral visitors, and of course some people who do a lot of work with young people as well. But this is a part of the equation that we've yet to fully explore. In some places, and Alan and myself were somewhere last night, I was asked the question, what are you going to do about growing God's church in this place? Well, without being rude, my answer would simply be back, what are you going to do?
Yep.
Because ultimately it's a partnership between lay and ordained. Because not all clergy have got the gifts, to do that. And I think the danger is the old culture of, as it was once described to me, Father knows best. No, we don't know best. And I think one of the best things that clergy can do is acknowledge their skills, their gifts, God-given, but realize there's a whole gap as well, which needs to be filled by good lay people. And so what the other part of the thing I've been doing as well, and will continue to do, as I've always done, is to encourage lay ministries, especially in those places where we have not got strong lay ministry presence already. And so you say you're retiring.
Well, I'm reaching a certain age very soon.
Yeah, but I was supposed to be retired in June. You can't retire yet, okay? They will not accept your resignation. But have a word with Anthony Porter and make yourself known to him. Have a conversation with Anthony and say, how can we encourage this similar ministry in other places? But I would suspect that your calling as an evangelist has come through good Bible study, good prayer groups, good nurturing, sound teaching, and fulfilling worship. So your calling is perhaps from the environment you're in, and therefore we need to encourage that elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's really the heart of what I'm saying. I think we enjoy a depth of fellowship and a depth of spirituality here, which I'm sure is something that I would hope other ministry areas might aspire to as well. And whether we can encourage that, I mean, you say you've used us as an example. Well, it would be nice if that could be really nurtured.
Yeah.
And I've spoken about the Leading Your Church into Growth course, for example.
Yes.
If that could become a norm rather than an exception, then that would be great.
Our bishop has been in touch with the Leading Your Church into Growth people, and it is hoped that by the end of the year onwards we will be selecting various teams from parishes, ministry areas, to go on the course afresh. And I've done it twice, and I've really benefited from it throughout my ministry. So yeah, that's something which, because of his experience of that he's bought into very strongly to support growth in ministry areas.
Any further questions?
Katie, over there.
Hello. As the previous ministry area administrator, you won't be surprised to know my question relates to administration.
Yeah.
You were saying that ministry areas are going to be recruiting, or the diocese initially will be recruiting administrators on a part-time basis, but centrally employed.
Yes.
Obviously, they'll be reporting in to the diocese as their employers, but they'll also be employed by the ministry area.
They will be employed by the diocese to work in the ministry area.
Yes.
So it's a partnership between the diocese and the ministry area. The diocese will deal with their HR, their training and the systems and their support as well within the ministry area.
Okay. So it's up then to the ministry area, I suppose, to agree with the administrator what each administrator's responsibilities are.
To look at the work that they do. There are some tasks which will be outlined in the job description, which when the advert comes out you will see. And obviously within that framework, whilst a lot of the things will be, shall we say, common across all the ministry areas, some of the tasks might be individual to particular churches. Like someone said to me the other day, well, I hope the ministry area administrator is good at managing churchyard grave plans and things like that. I said, well, we haven't quite thought of that, but it's something you can put into the mix. So obviously there will be some negotiation as to place of employment, times of employment, but that's again when the advert comes out, what we're saying to people is we'll advertise it far and wide for all the ministry areas. There'll be a job description, there'll be an application pack, and people can apply if they feel that that new role suits them.
2 questions from that. When are the adverts coming out?
We think in probably about 3 weeks' time.
Okay.
Good.
The administrator, the supervisors.
Yeah, there's 2 roles, different roles. The ministry area administration supervisor is being advertised now, and we're looking to shortlist an interview in a few weeks' time. That advert's been out since last week. Following on from that, once you've appointed that person, we will be looking to shortlist and interview administrators as well.
Okay, thank you. And you said earlier on that the administrators' contracts would be centrally with the diocese and there would be no cost to the ministry area.
Exactly.
So nothing that is part of our ministry share is going towards
No, it's money that we've been able to obtain as a diocese from the representative body. Historically, as a diocese, and Jeff will know this as well, with the ugly sister, us and Monmouth diocese have not got the historic assets and resources that the Landaffs, the St David's, Bangors and St Asaph have. Our budget is always on a shoestring. So literally we've gone to the Church in Wales have said they're releasing 100 million back into the diocese. So we've gone to them and said, basically, we need money to put ministry into places, but also we need money to support that ministry as well. And they've given us the money to do that.
Okay, so there won't be, year by year, where's the next 3
5
months'
years,
salary coming from?
For 5 years, it's free. For the next 5 years after that, it'll have to be 50% funded by the ministry area. Okay, but still, the HR will be done by the diocese.
And payroll and all that sort of pensions.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Sorry.
On a similar vein, but slightly different, just going back a step, you've talked a lot about all the nuts and bolts and how the mechanics will work and so on. And you also made reference to older congregations moving forward. I'm the youth worker, voluntary youth worker here, and we've been trying to get a paid youth worker, youth leader to move to progress the work, because we've got a lot of kids coming, got over 30 registered, and a lack of volunteers. Few people are coming forward to help now, but we really need, we've got a vision for youth work here and working with the schools and in the community and so on. And we really can't, if we want the next generations, and the youngsters and their families, what are the sort of moves on the ministry area circuit, vision and, further afield for the diocese of paid, like the administrators, paid youth workers administrated from, from the diocese?
At the moment, we are employing the 4, youth officers that have been with us for some time. There may be some redeployment of them. We're looking at that at the moment. However, at the moment, I would say that obviously for individual parishes or ministry areas, because it would be a ministry area youth worker, that is something that they would have to look to the employment of themselves for grants, etc. at this present time. However, like we did when we employed our own youth worker on Gower, we used Faith and Families in Swansea to do the HR and the payroll. So they took that side of it off us. So we were just doing the deployment of the youth worker. It depends, I think, in reality, I suppose, what sort of hours that you were looking for. Is that person somebody already in your church community? Are you looking to develop an existing ministry, or are you looking to bring a new ministry in? But at the moment, not saying that won't change, but at the moment, we're just trying to get the basics, the bedrock of the ministry areas in with administration, with clergy, and then look at the needs from there. Things will develop, but I would seriously suggest that if you are looking to employ a youth worker, the Diocesan Mission Grant Fund, the Austin Bailey Fund, And in rural areas, I think sometimes the Catwg Foundation and the Roundtree Foundation as well will also help with funding for youth workers. So that again, but if you get the HR done by the Faith in Families organisation, that's a good way of doing it.
With that.
Yeah.
It's just finding someone as well.
It is,
and it's not that appealing just in a small parish.
No.
If they had a wider remit.
But I think sometimes if you were to say, look, this is youth work in a variety of schools, in a variety of settings, it's a variety of the work as well. But obviously, and I can't say, I would say this is how we did it on Gala. We actually asked each of the churches to contribute something towards that. Thank you.
Yes,
Since it is next to me, forgive me if I ask a very simple question, which is that you contemplate that local church committees will exist, and also that each local church will continue to have responsibility for mission, outreach to the community, and management of its own funds, as opposed to those funds which the Ministry Area Council will govern. What is the model which you contemplate for either selecting or electing the local church committee, having abolished the PCC?
That would be down to the individual church council. The way I've seen it work depends sometimes on the side of the church. If you have a large church congregation, some of those churches will still hold elections. But technically, in a church council, it could be the whole church congregation on the church council. In practice, that doesn't always work out because some people want to do that sort of thing, others don't. But it's just an informal gathering in most cases. But in some places, they have retained elections to that body. But what I find in practice is that usually if you say you're having a church council meeting after church, you've got to lock the door and stop people running out. So you would decide that yourselves. The individual church will say, well, we're either going to have an informal gathering, chaired by the subwardens, or we're going to say, okay, we have, out of a congregation of perhaps say 30, we only need 6 people on our church council, therefore, can you nominate and choose 6 people? But it's not a legal body, it's just actually a better way of managing the local church's affairs in partnership with the Ministry Area Council. Does that answer your question, sir?
Well, not entirely, because I don't know how you resolve matter. I don't know how you resolve matters if you simply leave it to each church. If 6 people say, well, I think that, 12 people say, well, I think that something else should be the model. Yeah. Would it not be helpful for there to be a model devised and proposed?
Because the ministry area, the church councils aren't an official legal body in that sense, to a certain extent we can't be directive and say you will do this or you will do that. I think the way we've found it best works is to leave the individual churches work that out for themselves. Now, if in your working agreement you as a ministry area council say we will be directive, that's entirely up to you. Or if you wish to say, okay, for the first 12 months, we'll see how it works by leaving it up to them. If it doesn't work, we'll be a bit more directive. But that's because it's not a legal body, you have the freedom to do that. So that might be done, that might be more trial and error. However, you could decide straight away to say, okay, in the individual churches, we will have a maximum of 6 people on the church council. That is something for you as a ministry area council to work out. If you want to make it more structured and more of an elected body within that church, you could. If you wanted it more open, more loose, you could as well.
I can see we'll have to put that on the agenda for next time, Claire.
Yeah. And that's not for me to direct on that, but I think it's for you as individual churches within this ministry area to work out for yourselves. Because what would work in your church may not work in another church. What would work in this ministry area might not work in another ministry area. But that's why we haven't said it's hard and fast that that's the way we have to do it. But I can see in some places where, and I can think of one church in particular I have, where they've had to hold elections because of the size of the congregation. Otherwise it would be too big and too unwieldy.
Right, okay. Any further questions? Jean's got her hand up at the back.
It suddenly dawned on me, what about electoral rolls? Do they still exist in the same way?
What we have currently on our benefice is an electoral roll for the whole of the benefice, but on there is a column that indicates where those people normally worship.
Oh.
Because in a benefice setting there needs to be one electoral roll.
Did you understand that, John? Because I'm not quite sure I did. Oh, good.
I'll repeat it if you like.
I'll explain.
One electoral roll for the whole of the ministry area, but indicated on, benefice, one electoral roll for the whole of the ministry area with a column perhaps indicating where those individuals worship.
So there's a lot of forms for you to throw away?
Well, they'll hang on to those for the time being because it will take time to change that over. You won't have to do that until the next revision of your electoral roll.
Okay. We've been going on quite a long time now. A lot more questions than we expected. Are there any more? Yes, please.
It seems to me that the official capacity of the PCC has been removed and has been moved up one layer. But now the Church Council is still going to be doing what the PCC did, but without the official title. But now the Church is going to start paying people to do the job of the ministry area. Now surely we've had volunteers doing this all the time. This is actually more expense for the Church, which sometimes one feels is already top heavy.
We're only employing a administrator, which I believe you've already done here already. That is the only extra person we're employing. The Ministry Area Council is not an employed body. That is still people who are elected out of each of the churches. And your local council, your local church council will still have, to do the work that you've always done to a certain extent. But the only paid person out of your share is the administrator, whoever he or she may be, that is actually paid for through money from the representative body. That is the only paid person, apart from your stipendiary clergy, in the ministry area.
I take your point. Can I just come in there? Because it's an argument that's been going on for a long time, that the church has been supported largely by volunteers. But the essential thing about the administrative role in a ministry area is that that person is full-time, part-time, doing the sort of duties for a whole area where you probably wouldn't get a volunteer to want to give up that sort of time. If you just had one parish with somebody taking on those sort of secretarial roles, that would work. But on this scale, it's really too much in this day and age to expect somebody to volunteer for a 20-hour-a-week type of job.
And we know that those 21 hours will be filled. There'll be enough work in those 21 hours for that person.
We've already proved it.
Yeah. What we're just doing, Jeff, is formalising an arrangement you've already had.
Yeah. Any more questions, please? Okay. Right, well, just remains for me to thank Peter for his really interesting presentation. I appreciated, I thought I knew all about this, but I appreciate quite a lot of the historical background and your own personal background that you put into what you were explaining to us earlier. I think it's made the whole picture much, much clearer for most of us. So thank you again for
my privilege
doing this. Thank you. Doing this so many times.
I've done this so many times, but it's different every time wherever you go, because your questions are the same in many ways, but there's also that nuances that apply to you individually as groups. Most of you should have found my contact details quite easily. I will welcome further conversations with you on the phone or online. As I said, I've got a plan A, I haven't got a plan B. I got some of the answers. There's still some questions we need to sort out as well. But I'd like to finish the night by just bringing it back for a moment to the God stuff. Let's pray. Father, for the things that we can work with, give us your blessing. For the things that we need to sort out, give us your help. For the things that we still struggle with, give us your faith. But send your Spirit upon these churches this night, that they would be uplifted by your presence in their lives. Wherever they be, wherever they are, whatever they do, however they minister to their community, whatever joys, whatever challenges they face, bless them, Lord, now and always. I ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Shall we share the grace with one another? The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Spirit be with us all evermore. Amen. And pray for me now as I travel back to Swansea. Actually, I would seriously ask for your prayers as I go about this ministry, because as I say, everything we do needs to be underpinned in prayer. God bless. Thank you very much indeed.